Imagine working your whole life to make your parents proud, only to realize you were never their priority. What if, on your graduation day, they paid off your siblings' debt but left you with yours, simply because they thought you were strong enough to handle it? This isn't just a story about family favoritism. It's about fighting for your worth when the people who should love you the most refuse to see you. Stay till the end. You won't believe how this all unfolds. And if you love powerful emotional stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. I've always known I was the afterthought in my family, the extra, the invisible one. My twin sister, Sophia, was the golden child. She had a bright smile that could charm anyone, a laugh that made people turn their heads. She was the one our parents adored, the one they always talked about with pride. And me, I was just there. I remember one particular moment that made it painfully clear. Our 10th birthday. Sophia got a brand new pink bicycle with a basket and streamers on the handlebars. It was exactly what she had wanted, and our parents beamed as she rode it around the driveway, laughing, basking in their attention. And me, I got a journal. For you to write your feelings, my mother had said with a dismissive smile. At the time, I forced myself to be grateful. Maybe she believed in me. Maybe she thought I had something important to say. But as the years passed, I realized the truth. She just didn't think I needed anything more. Sophia and I were both intelligent, but we had different ways of showing it. She was the type who could charm her way through situations, effortlessly making friends and getting teachers to like her. I was the one who worked late into the night, memorizing every detail, making sure I understood every lesson. And yet, whenever Sophia barely scraped by on a test, our parents would celebrate her as if she had won a scholarship. "She tries so hard," my mother would say, ruffling Sophia's hair. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart." "And me? Elena's doing fine," my father would say dismissively. "She always does." That was the theme of my life. Sophia needed attention, I didn't. Sophia needed support, I was independent. It wasn't that I hated her. She was my sister, my twin, and in some ways I loved her more than anything. But there was always that small bitter seed inside me. Why wasn't I enough? It became worse when we got older. We both dreamed of becoming doctors. It was something we had talked about since we were little, playing with toy stethoscopes and pretending to diagnose our stuffed animals. But while Sophia was fascinated with the idea of being a doctor, I was fascinated with learning to be one. She studied just enough to get by. I pushed myself to be the best. When we both got accepted into medical school, I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe now they'll see me. Maybe now my parents would finally acknowledge me as more than just the other daughter. But at the family dinner meant to celebrate, all the speeches were about Sophia. My father raised his glass with a proud smile. "To Sophia, who worked so hard to get here." Everyone clapped, cheering, congratulating her. My mother wiped away a tear, talking about how proud she was, how much Sophia had overcome. And me? A pat on the shoulder, a murmured, "Good job too, Elena." I had done just as much. No, I had done more. But I was just there. That was the first time I felt it deep in my bones, the truth that no matter what I did, no matter how hard I worked, I would always be second place. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. Instead, I smiled and took a sip of my water, swallowing down the hurt like I always did. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. I couldn't change my parents. I couldn't make them see me the way they saw Sophia. But I could prove, to myself, if no one else, that I was worth something. I would work harder. I would push myself further. And one day, they would have no choice but to see me. Medical school was a battlefield, but I thrived under pressure. While other students struggled with the overwhelming workload, I embraced it. Every sleepless night, every exhausting exam, every moment of self-doubt, I pushed through them all because I had no choice. Unlike Sophia, who always had our parents to fall back on, I knew I was on my own. I couldn't afford to fail, not even once, and Sophia, on the other hand, barely kept her head above water. She wasn't unintelligent, but she lacked the discipline, the drive. I watched as she crammed for exams the night before, relying on sheer luck and charm to get by, and when she inevitably panicked, she called our parents in tears. And, as always, they rushed to comfort her. "Sweetheart, you're doing amazing," Mom would coo over the phone. "We're so proud of you. Just do your best, okay?" I never made those calls. Not once. And not because I didn't have bad days. I did. I had moments when I felt like I was drowning, when the weight of expectations and exhaustion crushed me. But what was the point of calling them? My father's voice echoed in my head, reminding me that I was strong and independent. No one was coming to save me. Despite everything, I excelled. My professors noticed my dedication, my ability to remain calm under pressure. Dr. Williamson, one of the most respected figures in our program, took me under his wing. "Elena, you have a brilliant mind," he told me one evening after a particularly intense lab session. "I'd like you to assist me with my research." It was an honor and opportunity most students would kill for, and I was proud. But when I shared the news with my parents, their reaction was painfully predictable. "That's wonderful, honey," my mother said, sounding distracted. Then, as if on autopilot, she immediately shifted the conversation. "Sophia had a rough exam today. She was so upset." And just like that, my achievement was swept aside, discarded as if it meant nothing. That night, I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at my reflection in the window. Why did I even bother telling them? But I didn't stop. I kept working, kept pushing myself harder. Then, in our final year, Dr. Williamson pulled me aside with a serious expression. "Elena, I'm nominating you for the Nightingale Scholarship." I froze. The Nightingale was one of the most prestigious scholarships in the country. It wasn't just about money, it was a golden ticket. The recipient would receive full funding for advanced medical training at Johns Hopkins. More than that, it would wipe out all student loan debt. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Williamson smiled. "You've earned this, Elena, and I have no doubt that you'll win." That night, for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the moment that would finally change everything. I told my family at dinner, my heart hammering in my chest. For once, I allowed myself to imagine their pride, their excitement. But instead of congratulations, I was met with silence. Sophia glanced down at her plate, poking at her food. My mother pursed her lips. "Sophia's been struggling lately," she said, her voice careful. Maybe this isn't the best time to bring this up." I blinked. "What?" "It's just that she's had a tough semester," Dad added, "and scholarships like that, they're competitive. Don't get your hopes up, Elena." My hands curled into fists under the table. "I didn't bring this up to make anyone feel bad," I said, my voice strained. "I just thought you'd be happy for me." "Of course we are," Mom said quickly. "It's just, well, Sophia needs more support right now. You're always so strong. You'll be fine no matter what happens." The words should have been comforting, but they weren't. They were a reminder, a confirmation of what I had known my whole life. I was always expected to be fine. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I should have been excited about the scholarship, but instead, all I felt was exhaustion. A deep, soul-crushing exhaustion that no amount of sleep could fix. But I couldn't afford to dwell on it, because if I won the Nightingale, it wouldn't just be a victory for me, it would be proof that I was more than just Sophia's shadow. I just had to win. Graduation was supposed to be one of the proudest moments of my life. a culmination of years of relentless hard work, sleepless nights, and sacrifices. But instead, it became the moment that shattered every remaining illusion I had about my family. The night before the ceremony, my parents called Sophia and me into the living room. They were smiling, excited, their hands clasped together like they were about to announce something wonderful. I should have known better. "We have some good news," Mom said, glancing at Dad before turning back to us. "Your father and I have decided we're paying off Sophia's student loans." My sister gasped, covering her mouth in shock before throwing her arms around our mother. "Oh my God, are you serious?" she squealed. My stomach twisted, but I waited. Any second now they would turn to me, tell me they were helping me too. Any second now I would hear the words I so desperately wanted, "And we're paying off yours as well." But the words never came. Instead, my father turned to me with a small, expectant smile. "Elena, we know you'll be able to handle your loans on your own. You've always been independent." I stared at them, my mind struggling to process what I had just heard. "What about me?" My voice was quiet, but there was a sharp edge to it. Dad let out a small sigh as if I was being difficult. "Elena, you've always been so responsible with money. You'll figure it out. Sophia needs more help than you do." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "You're really doing this?" I asked, my voice cracking. "You're paying off her debt and leaving me with mine?" My mother gave me that familiar, patient look, the one she always used when she thought I was overreacting. "Honey, it's not about fairness. It's about what each of you needs. Sophia struggles more with finances. You're strong, Elena. You don't need us to hold your hand." Something inside me snapped. I let out a hollow, bitter laugh. "That's not fair. I worked just as hard as she did. Harder. And you're telling me I don't deserve the same support because I'm strong?" Sophia shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. My parents exchanged a look, as if they had already expected my reaction. My father sighed again, rubbing his temples. "Elena, please don't make this a big deal. We're doing what we think is best for the family." Best for the family.
Right.
That was what they always said whenever they justified their favoritism. I could feel my hands shaking, my heart pounding with a mixture of rage and disbelief. So, because I don't fall apart crying every time things get hard, I don't deserve help? My voice rose, and I didn't care. "Do you even realize how much I've had to do on my own? How many nights I spent studying while you were comforting Sophia over her mediocre grades? How I pushed myself twice as hard just to be noticed?" "Elena," my mother started, but I cut her off. "No, you know what? Forget it. I don't even know why I'm surprised." My voice was thick with unshed tears. "You've made it clear my whole life who matters more." I turned and walked away before they could say another word. I locked myself in my room, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I sank onto my bed. My chest ached with a pain so deep, so raw I could barely breathe. I had spent years trying to earn their approval, their love, and in the end, it had all been for nothing. There was a soft knock on my door. "Elena?" It was Sophia. I didn't answer. I didn't have the energy to deal with her right now. I didn't know they were doing this," she said hesitantly. "I didn't ask them to pay my loans, I swear." I clenched my jaw. "And yet, you're not telling them to stop, are you?" Silence. Then a small, guilty whisper. "I'm sorry." I squeezed my eyes shut. "Just go, Sophia." I heard her sigh before her footsteps retreated. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Jake. "I'm outside. Come talk to me." I wiped my eyes, grabbed a jacket, and slipped out the back door. Jake was leaning against his car, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. The moment he saw me, he opened his arms, and without hesitation, I stepped into them. "They're paying off Sophia's loans," I mumbled into his chest, my voice barely above a whisper. I felt his body stiffen. "And not yours?" I shook my head. He let out a sharp exhale, his arms tightening around me. Elena, I'm so sorry. I pulled back, laughing bitterly. You know what the worst part is? I should have seen it coming. I should have known. But a small, stupid part of me actually thought maybe this time would be different. Jay cupped my face, forcing me to meet his gaze. You don't need their approval to prove your worth. You never did. I swallowed hard. It still hurts. I know, he kissed my forehead gently. But you're stronger than them, Elena, and I promise you, one day, they're going to regret taking you for granted. I nodded, but deep down, I wasn't sure if I believed him. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at my acceptance letter for the Nightingale Scholarship. I hadn't told my family about it yet. I had wanted to wait until it was official, until I knew for sure. But now, I didn't care. I was done waiting for them to acknowledge me. I was done hoping for something that would never come. And tomorrow, at graduation, they were going to see me whether they wanted to or not. Graduation day arrived with all the fanfare and excitement one would expect, but I felt numb as I slipped on my cap and gown. My parents had spent the entire morning doting on Sophia, making sure she looked perfect, fussing over her hair and makeup, telling her how proud they were. No one had even knocked on my door to check on me. It was almost laughable, but I had promised myself I wouldn't let their neglect define this day for me. As we arrived at the venue, the grand hall buzzed with laughter and excitement. Families hugged their graduates, beaming with pride, capturing the moment in countless photos. I stood slightly apart, taking it all in, watching as my parents introduced Sophia to every family friend they could find. "This is our daughter, Sophia," they gushed. "A doctor now. We're so proud." I was standing right there, yet it was as if I didn't exist. Jake arrived a few minutes later, slipping his hand into mine, grounding me. "You ready?" he asked, his voice low, meant only for me. I nodded, though in truth, I wasn't sure. I had been preparing for this moment my entire life, but now that it was here, the weight of my family's dismissal pressed down on me like a suffocating force. Then the ceremony began, and we all filed inside. I sat stiffly through the speeches, waiting for the moment my name would be called, waiting for my validation, not from my parents, but from myself. When it was finally my turn, I walked across the stage, shook hands with the dean, and accepted my diploma. The applause was polite, distant, nothing compared to the cheers that erupted when Sophia's name was called just minutes later. My parents stood, clapping enthusiastically, their pride evident in every exaggerated motion. My mother wiped away a tear, my father looked on with admiration, and I felt nothing. Then came the post-graduation celebration. My parents had gone all out, renting a grand banquet hall, inviting family, friends, even professors, but it was all for Sophia. Every speech, every toast, every carefully curated moment was about her. I watched from the corner, sipping my drink, unseen as always. And then something happened that none of us could have predicted. Dr. Williamson stood from his seat, tapping his glass with a spoon, signaling for attention. The room quieted, all eyes turning toward him. "Before we go any further," he began, his voice carrying with effortless authority, "I'd like to take a moment to recognize an outstanding student, someone whose dedication, intelligence, and perseverance have been truly remarkable." I felt my heart skip a beat. "This year," he continued, "one of our graduates has been awarded the prestigious Nightingale Scholarship, a scholarship that not only recognizes academic excellence, but also grants full funding for advanced medical training at Johns Hopkins, along with the complete elimination of student debt." There was a murmur of excitement. My parents perked up, and I saw it. Their immediate assumption, they thought he was talking about Sophia. My mother's hand flew to her chest, her eyes shining with anticipation. Sophia herself sat up straighter, already composing the humble acceptance speech she'd never have to give. Dr. Williamson smiled, then turned to me. "Congratulations, Dr. Elena Carter." Silence. Utter deafening silence. Then, an explosion of applause. My classmates, my professors, even people I barely knew clapped and cheered. But my parents? Their smiles froze. Their excitement shattered in an instant. My mother's hands fell to her lap. My father's face went pale. And Sophia? She looked like she had just been slapped. I stood slowly, every movement deliberate, feeling the weight of their stares as I walked to the front of the room. Dr. Williamson extended his hand, and I shook it firmly, the warmth of his pride radiating toward me. When he handed me the microphone, I took a slow breath, steadying myself. I spent my whole life trying to be seen, I began, my voice clear, unwavering, trying to prove that I was worthy of recognition, of love, of being enough. But today, I realized something. I let my gaze sweep across the room, meeting my parents' eyes for the briefest moment. I never needed anyone's validation but my own. The applause was thunderous. I handed the microphone back to Dr. Williamson and turned to take my seat. But before I even made it halfway across the room, my mother grabbed my arm. "Elena," she said, her voice hushed, frantic. "Why didn't you tell us?" I stared at her, incredulous. "Would you have cared?" She flinched, as if I had struck her. "Of course, My father cleared his throat. "This is a big deal." His voice was careful now, measured. "We should celebrate." I pulled my arm free. "You already had your celebration." My voice was quiet but sharp enough to cut through the noise around us. "And I wasn't a part of it." I walked away before they could say another word, my chest tight, my mind reeling. Jake found me moments later, his eyes filled with pride. "That," he said, "was the best damn speech I've ever heard." I let out a shaky breath, a small, exhausted laugh escaping me. "It felt good," I admitted. "Good?" he grinned. "Elena, you just turned your entire life around in 5 minutes. That was legendary." And maybe, for the first time, I believed it. As I glanced back toward the banquet hall, watching my parents struggle to process what had just happened, I felt something I hadn't in years. Freedom. For so long I had been chasing their approval, desperate for their love, their recognition. But now, as I stood there, feeling the weight of my achievements settle in, I realized I didn't need it. I never had. I had made it on my own. And that was more than enough. The days following the graduation party were eerily quiet. My parents didn't call, didn't text, didn't even attempt to reach out. I suppose they were still processing what had happened, still trying to reconcile the fact that I had outshined Sophia in the one moment they thought was meant to be hers. But for the first time in my life, their silence didn't hurt me. It didn't make me feel invisible. It didn't make me doubt my worth. Instead, it felt like freedom. I spent those days packing for Baltimore, preparing for the next phase of my life at Johns Hopkins. Jake helped, filling my apartment with easy conversation, acting as if nothing had changed, even though we both knew everything had. One evening, as we stacked boxes near the door, he sat down on the couch, watching me carefully. "So, are you going to talk to them before you leave?" he asked. I hesitated, folding a sweater, pretending to be more focused on the fabric than the question itself. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me feels like I should, but another part of me wonders, why should I be the one to reach out? They made their choice." Jake leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Yeah, they did. But maybe this isn't just about them anymore. Maybe this is about you deciding how you want to move forward." I sighed, knowing he was right. Avoiding them forever wouldn't erase the years of neglect, wouldn't undo the hurt, but it also wouldn't change who they were. And I had already spent too much of my life waiting for them to become the parents I needed them to be. That weekend, I finally called. My mother answered on the third ring, her voice careful, uncertain. "Elena." "Hi, Mom." The silence stretched between us, thick with unsaid words, with questions neither of us knew how to ask. Finally, she cleared her throat. "We were going to call, we didn't know if you wanted to talk to us." I almost laughed at the irony. They had ignored me for years, yet now they hesitated out of fear of being ignored. "I'm leaving for Baltimore next week," I told her. "I thought you should know." Another pause. "That's wonderful. We're very proud of you." Proud. It was the word I had wanted to hear my whole life, yet now it felt hollow, as if it had come too late to matter. "Thanks," I said simply. Dad took the phone then, his voice gruffer, as if forcing himself to say things he wasn't used to saying. "Listen, Elena, we made mistakes. I see that now." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. "What exactly do you see, Dad?" My voice was steady, but I needed to hear it from him. I needed to know if he truly understood. A heavy sigh. "That we should have been there for you. That we should have seen you." His voice cracked slightly, betraying emotions I had never heard from him before. "We weren't fair to you, and I won't make excuses, but I want to make things right, if you'll let us." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. The old me, the girl who had spent years craving their approval, might have jumped at the chance to fix things, but the woman I had become, she knew better. "I don't know if things can be fixed," I admitted, "but I do know that I'm done chasing after something you never gave me willingly." "Elena, please," Mom started, but I cut her off gently. "I'm not saying I won't talk to you. I'm just saying that from now on, the effort has to go both ways." There was a long silence before she finally whispered, "I understand." Maybe for the first time, she actually did. The day I left for Baltimore, Sophia showed up at my apartment. She stood in the doorway, shifting awkwardly, looking like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. I crossed my arms, waiting. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to see you before you left," she admitted, biting her lip. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to say this." She took a deep breath. "I was a coward. I should have spoken up for you. I should have told Mom and Dad that what they did wasn't fair, but I didn't, because it was easier to pretend I didn't notice." I didn't say anything, waiting for her to continue. She swallowed hard. "I know an apology won't erase everything, but I am sorry, and I want to do better. I want to be a better sister, if you'll let me." For the first time in a long time, I saw genuine remorse in her eyes. And despite everything, despite all the years of resentment, I realized I didn't hate her. I never had. "It's not going to be easy," I warned her. She nodded. "I know, but I want to try." I exhaled slowly before stepping aside. "Then come in." As we sat together, talking for the first time as equals rather than as competitors, I felt something shift. Maybe our relationship would never be perfect, but at least now, it had the chance to be real. 3 months later, I stood on the rooftop of Johns Hopkins, overlooking the city skyline. The air was crisp, the possibilities endless. I had spent years waiting for my family's approval, for them to finally see me. But standing there, under the vast open sky, I realized the truth. I had never needed their recognition to be worthy. I had always been enough. And now I was free.